Hello, the Canada Files viewers. This is Aidan Jonah, editor-in-chief of the Canada Files. Just a quick note, this is a green screen. This is not a green screen. We've had some technical issues and we're buying a new green screen in time for the next interview. Please work with this just for one time. Now, Canada Files audience, we are speaking with a rather remarkable fellow. That is Yves Engler. You used to know him as the 13-time author, a critic of Canadian foreign policy, but now he is also a federal NDP leadership candidate. Now, we spoke to Mr. Engler before, a few months ago, but the campaign has carried on. So, Yves Engler, thank you for speaking with the Canada Files.
Thanks for having me.
Now, there's been much controversy about your choice not to yet formally file your federal leadership candidacy with the NDP. So, what is the strategy behind this move?
Yeah, as you know, we announced that we were running back in July, and we announced before the formal race began. In late August, there was a um, package made available to prospective NDP leadership candidates. And we asked for that right away. The NDP took their time to provide us with this document. They refused to respond to calls from our financial agent. And as of early September, it was possible to formally enter the race. And we have decided to fulfill a number of the requirements to participate in the race while holding off on one of those, the vetting process. So we have gathered the signatures required. You need 500 members to sign nomination document. We have raised about $85,000. You have to pay the party ultimately $100,000 to participate in the race. And but we haven't gone in for vetting. And the reason for not going in for vetting is because the vetting package that they have sent uh, is offers a lot of space to just expel a candidate from the race based upon three backroom insiders deciding that you don't fulfill the values. And they have questions in this package, for instance, about have you ever been thrown out of university? Well, I have. I was in the student union back in 2002 at Concordia, and Benjamin Netanyahu, tried to speak at Concordia, and long saga, but I was ultimately thrown out of university due to a protest activity. So we know that the NDP has a history of blocking candidates who they don't like for political reasons. In leadership race in BC, Angeli Aparai was excluded far into the race because she looked like she was about to win, and the party leadership didn't want her to win. So we know, and there's also been Zionist groups that have been calling from within 24 hours of announcing candidacy, Zionist groups calling for my me to be blocked from the race. So we're basically trying to build momentum, trying to show that we have lots of support. We have 1,000 people who signed up to volunteer in the campaign. We've released a detailed policy platform. We've done probably about 15 public speaking events. We've released many press releases and videos and the like. So we're basically creating momentum and the perception that we're in the race to make it more difficult for the NDP brass to the three-person backroom insiders to decide that this campaign of 1,000 volunteers is not allowed to participate. If they're going to block us, we want to ensure that it's done. They're not able to do it quietly, but that it's a public affair. And so we've campaigned that way. And the rules are really clear. We have until January to, if we so want to wait all the way to January. Now we lose a lot by not formally joining the race. So, for instance, all the other those who have um, passed vetting have access to the NDP list. So when we do our public events, we're able to get a fair number of people out, but we're doing that all based upon contacts that we have or local campaigners, and not the big NDP list. When we fundraise, we are doing that uh, without being able to give tax credit. So we have registered with Elections Canada. We're following all the Elections Canada rules. So we're constrained by Elections Canada as a prospective candidate, but we are not able to give the benefit that Election Canada offers, i.e., donors tax credits when they donate to the campaign. So the it's a strategic calculation. Now the NDP has gone to the press. The NDP has been sending us private communications for a while, and went to the press and is trying to pressure us to submit. And is basically trying to create an impression that we're breaking the rules. We're not. We have communications from the NDP back in early September that detail this. We were in communications with Elections Canada. We're following all Elections Canada rules. So unfortunately, this may end up before the courts.
Very interesting. Now, if the NDP does go ahead and after you eventually submit for vetting, they do cut you off, they kick you out of the race, right? They don't let you run. Would you commit to using the volunteer force and the fundraising towards some sort of organizing, like of an organization or a new party, instead of just giving the money back and letting everything disperse?
For sure. Where a bit premature. We want to be part of this race. We think we should be part of this race. It would be um quite a bad comment on the state of the NDP to block this type of grassroots campaign. We have brought forward the discussion of capitalism in a way that hasn't been part of NDP races or NDP affairs in many years. There's an appetite, very clearly an appetite for this discussion. Yes, we certainly are not just going to if they were to say no, just say, oh, okay, well, let's go home and have a nap. We will be challenging it in any different legally. We will be challenging it politically. We will be doing everything we can to have some form of a parallel campaign if they were to exclude us. And then the broader discussion about, do you try to set up a new political party, or do you continue it as some sort of socialist internationalist organization? That's, I think, again, somewhat premature, but certainly people are considering those questions.
Yeah, most certainly we'll hope to see you running in the NDP federal leadership race. I only bring it up because I've heard stories online about, for example, after the Bernie Sanders campaigns, about discords and organizing spaces just getting entirely shut down and all that momentum being wasted. That's all why I ask.
No, and that's a fair question. We definitely do not. We want this to be. We always understood this as a insurgent challenge to power that is designed to we want to be. I want to be the leader of the NDP to push for fundamental changes in Canadian society, but also that I see this as part of a broader grassroots anti-imperialist activist campaign that is, whether it's within the channels of the party or outside of those channels, it needs to grow and build.
Right. Now, I want to talk to you about your recently released policy platform. So, first of all, the platform speaks of the eventual aim of governance by, quote, directly elected councils of workers and the oppressed delegates who remain fully accountable and can be recalled at any moment. Now, if you were victorious in the NDP leadership race, you win a seat in Canada's parliament, good case scenario. How are you thinking you'd be able to fight for such a change without having MPs try to expel you from Parliament? Because I'm going to go back in history. Think about Louis Riel. Riel got expelled at least once from Parliament by MPs despite being elected by his own people. And I think he even got expelled a second time. I'll add a note if I'm incorrect there. So there is a history. I mean, think even of what happened to Fred Rose. Fred Rose is different, but there's a history of the mainstream parliament expelling radicals. So I just want to float that question to you.
Yeah, I mean that's many steps away from where we're at now. We there's no doubt. I mean, we're seeing blocks within the NDP. Wouldn't even let me into the Ontario NDP convention. They they wouldn't give me a visitor's pass. Then, as they gave other NDP candidates, they wouldn't give me a observer's pass. They wouldn't let me pay for that. And then when we asked for media credentials, they wouldn't do that either. So that, we're many steps away from being in the House of Commons, and there's already all kinds of blocks being presented before us. I think that yeah, you would have all kinds of different attacks from coming from all kinds of different directions if I was to win a seat. Well, first of all, if I get in the race, formally in the race, there will be all kinds of corporate media attacks. There's already been many corporate media attacks before we're formally in the race, and and so there will be all kinds of different attacks. Now, the question is how do you deal with them? If you can you use them to strengthen working class consciousness and activism and organization? Can you use it to strengthen social movements and demonstrating the hollowness of some of the liberal rhetoric of democracy? I think that if they expel you from parliament, that can sometimes you can galvanize by that. Now, none of this would be easy, but I think we're many steps away from that. But in terms of the policy platform, I want to just start off with giving a little bit of an understanding of how this policy platform came together, which I'm very proud of. And that's actually has very little to do with me. Basically, a policy committee of 45 came together, met via online, broke down into 6 different committees. They then drafted policy on specific subject area, and then that was brought back to the main coordinators, and they drafted very elaborate policy. It took almost 2.5, 3 months. They went out to some outside researchers. They went to some outside Indigenous leaders, and they came together with this very elaborate policy that is not just, I think, quite good in terms of giving detail of the vision, an aspirational vision, an inspirational and aspirational vision, but was also, it was done in a way that was very open, very transparent. Probably towards 100 people in total worked on all different facets of the platform. I didn't. I was had a fairly tertiary role in the whole thing. It was decided early on that I would have a veto if there's anything that I really disagreed with, that I would have a veto on it. But it was basically done in this very open democratic way, which is basically empowering people. I mean, the only way, as your question about being expelled from parliament, if you put forward genuinely anti-colonial or anti-imperialist or anti-capitalist ideas, that there would be efforts to expel you. The only way to really combat that is by mass organization, mass mobilization. And so you need people to be engaged, you need people to be empowered, you need people to have a higher level of political understanding. And this policy platform embodies that in how it was done, and what the actual details of the policy are.
Thanks, Yves. Now, Palestine is obviously on almost any Canadian anti-imperialist's mind. So, what are the most important actions an Yves Engler-led NDP would push for to support the fight for Palestinian liberation?
Well, I think there'll be two ways to break that down. I think the first way is just a policy frame, and I'll get that in a second. I mean, I'll go to that first. So the I've said this many times. If Canada just upheld its own laws, not international law, its own laws vis-a-vis Israel, it would go a long way to ending Canadian uh, complicity. It would send a message to the Israeli government, Israeli public. And what I'm talking about is that Export-Import Act says it's illegal to export arms to countries involved in massive human rights violations. Obviously, Israel is involved in massive human rights violations. The Canada Revenue Agency rules for registered charities, about 300 of which assist projects in Israel, they say that it's contrary to CRA rules to assist a foreign military, to assist foreign municipalities, racist organizations, and West Bank settlements. Dozens of organizations in Canada, subsidized by all Canadians, assist the Israeli military, municipalities in Israel, racist organizations, and West Bank settlements, which contravene official Canadian policy. So just ending that flow of resources to Israel would have a concrete military material impact and also send a message. Likewise, the Foreign Enlistment Act says that it is illegal to induce, that's the word they use, induce Canadians to join a foreign military. Well, there are many institutions in this country that have been inducing Canadians to join the Israeli military. There's a school in Toronto where a quarter of the graduates have, according to Canadian Jewish News, joined the Israeli military. The War Crimes and Crimes Against Humanity Act says that those engaged in major human rights violations should be prosecuted. Well, there's been all kinds of Canadians fighting in Gaza. There's also been all kinds of Israelis who've come to Canada who fought in Gaza. They should be prosecuted. So just those four areas of upholding Canadian law would go a long way in lessening Canadian complicity. Now, more generally, we've talked about, and the document elaborates it a bit more, about abolishing Canada's anti-Palestinian terrorism list, recognizing that Palestinians have a right under international law to resist illegal occupation. We've talked, there's things like the bubble zones, the special envoy to justify Israeli colonialism, so-called anti-Semitism envoy, abolished that. So we've detailed a number of areas of pretty concrete policy. Most of it is really structured on just stopping treating Israel as this special, unique country that gets, special benefits. Now, that's one side of it. The other side of it, and to varying degrees, now NDP leaders are willing to talk about some of those points that I just raised. But the other side to this is the activist campaigning side. And this is where I would say, for the most part, the NDP has been a utter disaster and I would say effectively complicit in the 2 years of a live stream Holocaust. And that's the fact that, for instance, on Saturday in Montreal, 15,000, some estimates say it was bigger than that. I did a look through, I'd say between 10 and 20,000 marched. This was, it was a major, major demonstration. There was, from what I can tell, nobody from the NDP that attended it, and there's been almost no participation of either NDP MPs like Alexandre Bourris or local associations at the demonstrations in Montreal. And I personally have been to at least 100 actions over the past 2 years, maybe two or 300 even. And so that's just that's just demonstrations. There's basically been, and in fact, Jagmeet Singh, he has criticized, he repeatedly criticized different demonstrations against genocide, claiming he followed the absurd claims of the most odious example, when Spider-Man for Palestine waved a flag And it happened to be on Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto, and the Zionists claimed it was because that hospital had Jewish roots, even though he had waved the flag on 7 or 8 different buildings along the route of the protest. And Jagmeet Singh joined in this absolutely odious attack against that demonstration. So when it comes to engaging, just even going to demonstrations, let alone being arrested, like why has there not been an NDP MP arrested in trying to defy 2 years of Canadian complicity in live stream Holocaust? I mean, that is a absolute outrage. That there not, I mean, every single NDP MP should have gotten themselves arrested opposing Canadian arms deliveries or the registered charities assisting the Israeli military or the schools that are sending kids to join the Israeli military or whatever, right? Like the fact that 2 years in, there's been almost no, okay, yeah, Heather McPherson had a watermelon pin in the House of Commons. I mean, it's better to have that than to not have that. But is that the images we're seeing out of Gaza? Is that enough? Of course not. It's not even close to enough. So there's a policy side to it, which we've detailed out, which is important, and it clearly goes much further than any other NDP leadership candidate is proposing. But there's also the equally important side, which is the campaigning side and actually standing up, attending, supporting this mass uprising. And it really is. It's the greatest opposition to Canadian imperialism or Canada's complicity in international crimes in the history of this country. There's never been more protest about an international issue than there has been over the past 2 years. And the NDP has been almost, not completely, but almost entirely absent.
Thanks, Eve. Now, I want to ask about international forums because I saw you talk about BRICS. That really came in my eye. So, what international forums would an Yves Engler NDP push for Canada to leave, and which forums would it want Canada to join, and why?
Yeah, I think the most important question here is a position that is considered really outside of bounds in official discussion now, but actually is the position that the NDP membership has endorsed, and that is Canada out of NATO. That's far and away the most important. All the other international forum questions are, in my mind, um, very much secondary. I mean, we'll get into that in a second, but the Canada out of NATO, it was voted on by NDP members in 1969, and it was never rescinded. It was just the leadership was able to sort of just jettison it aside in the late 1980s. And the reason the Canada-NATO is so important is because NATO is, of course, a aggressive, belligerent, U.S.-dominated alliance, and it has, wars in Afghanistan, Yugoslavia, Libya. It going back to its early days, it assisted European colonial rule in Africa and Asia. Canada provided all kinds of weaponry, gave the French bullets while they were killing people with Canadian bullets in Algeria. And it's always been a tool of US-led geopolitical domination. It was about basically it had an anti-communist or anti-socialist dimension to it in terms of Western Europe after World War II. And then it was about bringing the European colonial order under US-led direction. And Canada assisted that in every step of the way. So NATO needs to go. Now, in the last bit, the danger of NATO has become even more stark. Obviously, there's the role NATO's played in provoking the horrible conflict, horrible war in Ukraine, which is a very devastating conflict. But also, NATO has become a clear threat to social programs and social entitlements in this country. Mark Carney in June agreed to hit the NATO 2% of GDP military spending target by the this year. And so he added a whole another $9 billion to the war budget by March to be spent by March. And that's already there was increases planned for the military budget. Then and the military budget has doubled over the past decade from about 20 billion to 40 billion. Then after this major increase, he agreed at the NATO summit to Donald Trump's 5% of GDP proposal, and the other NATO countries agreed to that. And that would increase Canadian military spending by about $100 billion a year within the next 9 years. And that's $100 billion every single year. So it is a huge sum of resources. The best case scenario is this is just a attack against social programs in this country. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is that this huge increase in military spending gives the monsters in Ottawa, the Carneys, the Pierre Poilievres, the Anita Nans, who've been enabling this live stream Holocaust in Gaza, it gives them greater means to intimidate and wage war internationally. That's the likely scenario. If you look at the history of the Canadian military, it works often, generally through NATO as part of belligerent US-led force. So Canada to NATO is an absolutely essential demand. If Canada spent on its military more like Mexico, which is somewhere just over 0.7% of GDP, that would free up a lot of resources for more socially useful endeavors. But we don't. We see the world through the NATO lens, and we see threats that are basically manufactured threats. So pulling out of NATO is centrally important. All the other questions are much, in my opinion, of lesser importance. Nonetheless, Canada, of course, should get out of NORAD. What we're seeing, that's the bilateral accord with the US that basically draws the Canadian military into all belligerent U.S. military operations. And so, for instance, with the recent attacks on Venezuelan and it appears now Colombian boats, that NORAD, which has a anti-drug mandate going back about 30 or so years, we're probably providing some form of intelligence for those U.S. strikes. So Canada out of NORAD is an important question. The G7, which is a club of leading capitalist nations, and then on the other side is the what are some of the alternatives? And in the policy platform, we talk about BRICS opening up that question. I think that is more let's think about it, let's talk about it, let's have that discussion. And I think that discussion, especially in the context of what Donald Trump has been doing in terms of the annexation threats, in terms of the different trade attacks, it's really Canada has to a certain extent boxed itself in, specifically when it comes to China, following the US on its anti-China policies, and then Trump making life difficult economically for different elements of Canadian economy. And so we have to basically move out of that sort of US lens order and discuss alternatives, including BRICS.
Now, you spoke about military spending, so I want to bring it to this. What changes to the Canadian military and arms industry would an Yves Engler-led NDP push for?
One of the most stark divides we've seen in the past 6 months is this popular frustration or anger with Donald Trump, of course, and the US, where you have Canadians not not going to Disneyland or canceling trips to the U.S. Fairly large numbers, the data suggests. And then you have the chief of the defense staff and other top Canadian military officials going down to the States and basically trying to deepen the ties with the U.S. military. There's somewhere in the range of 1,000 accords that have been signed between the U.S. and Canadian, military-related accords. And I've called for a pause. Like, so long as Donald Trump is threatening to annex Canada, Canada should pause officer exchanges with the U.S. military. Pause deployments, these naval deployments that are joining U.S. military vessels in the South China Sea or in the Mediterranean, assisting sort of U.S. power projection globally. Just pause them, not let alone like actually cancel or stop or forever, but just put them on pause so long as Trump is making these annexation threats. Uh, the depth to this, the chief of defense staff, instead of pausing these things, is going down to the states to figure out ways of deepening ties with the U.S. military. So that is a contradiction that is just so flagrant. On one hand, the public is boycotting trips to the U.S. is all kinds of anger towards the U.S. and actually a lot of people are supporting, bizarrely, increased military spending on the grounds they feel threatened by the U.S., by Trump's threats. And yet our military is completely oriented not to defend against the only country that could invade, which of course is the U.S. It's to assist that military all around the world. So that those are, this is superficial kind of things that could be pursued in the short term, which is pausing some of the military accords, pausing some of the the officer exchanges and naval deployments, and basically reevaluating the ties with the U.S. Military. The Canadian military, from its inception, is been viewed itself as part of empire. It is the outgrowth of the British military that conquered these lands. The Royal Military College, Kingston, set up in 1876, according to official historian of the Royal Military College, was to train, quote, proper white gentlemen to be officers in British imperialism, and that's in Africa and different parts of Asia. And that institution, which was to assist the British Empire after World War II, it morphed into an institution to assist the U.S. empire. So we have to first of all talk about that, and simple measures like pausing officer exchanges and naval deployments with the U.S. is would be a step towards breaking away from this institution as just a tool of U.S. Empire power projection.
Alrighty, now I want to shift to the intelligence front because they have really run riot in the last few years. How would your leadership of the NDP push for Canada to rein these intelligence agencies in and their international collaborations, such as the Five Eyes?
Yeah, we've called to withdraw from the Five Eyes. The Five Eyes is a racist, white supremacist intelligence sharing arrangement. The five countries are the not the biggest English speaking populations in the world, but the uh, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, Britain, and the U.S. They're the European settler colonial states. And the Five Eyes has become an important part of the U.S. tool, particularly to target China. So we should withdraw from the Five Eyes. Canada assists the U.S. NSA through the Five Eyes a lot. the budgets of the communications security establishment, which is essentially Canada's NSA, and CSIS should be reined in. They should be reduced, and the we need to enhance the oversight and the different political control. The CSE and CSIS often are more concerned with their sort of relationship to the NSA and to the US than they are to the political officials. Uh, Also, we need to strengthen the the rights on paper. The charter says we have the right to protest, but as we know, the intelligence, CSIS particularly, undercut that in all kinds of ways through intimidation. One of the things that we've called for is the end of the terrorism list, which has been one of the vehicles in which CSIS particularly has been able to intimidate um, different marginalized ethnic communities, particularly after 9/11 in the US, the targeting of Muslim communities. But there's also been in recent years a real a targeting of Chinese Canadians. And just one thing with that, like the RCMP's 2.5 or so year supposed investigation about these Chinese Canadian two community organizations here in Montreal. They're claiming they were like Chinese police stations. That just collapsed, and the RCMP has just admitted that they have no evidence of that, but they almost destroyed those organizations and stoked all kinds of xenophobia. So that needs to be challenged by reducing the budgets and by obviously in the case of the Five Eyes by simply getting out of that arrangement, which has all kinds of negative effects on the outlook of the intelligence agencies.
Now, on the China front, continuing on, how would an Yves Engler-led NDP, other than, of course, getting out of the Five Eyes, push for an end to Canadian state demonization of China and the Chinese Canadian community?
I think the NDP needs to apologize for its role in things like the Handong smear attacks, which Jagmeet Singh very much, the former NDP leader, very much participated in. The um, the NDP has taken, I would say, largely has assisted, has in fact often criticized the Liberals from a more hawkish direction on China, and that's obviously wrong. I also think it's been a tactical, like a strategic error from an electoral standpoint. The NDP has there is divisions here. There's divisions between Don Davies, for instance, who's the interim leader of the party, and Jenny Kwan, who has been a real hawk on on kind of anti-China. Uh, the so there needs to be a recognition of these I would say mistakes electorally because I think that they've believed the media hype that the Chinese community actually opposes the Chinese government or and that it's going along or wants this sort of aggressive policy, and I don't think that's actually true. I think there's lots of often U.S. NED funded organizations in Canada and that do want to stoke tensions, but in fact, there's a real divergence of opinion within the Chinese community, and the majority don't, whatever their opinion about the Chinese government is, they don't like the demonization because it has a sort of racist spillover on them. We're talking about 2 million, a community of about 2 million, so it's quite significant in a number of ridings. And the NDP has chosen. I'm not actually sure if this has been properly thought through, to be honest with you. I think there's actually, this is an example where they're not really fully assessing the simple self-interest of the party. They've kind of gone along with the media attacks, thinking that's where things are at. And new polling has shown, particularly younger people, are not at all on board for the demonization of China. There was polls, even the Globe and Mail, which has been leading the charge against China over the past few years. They published, that's about 6 weeks, 2 months ago, a couple of these polls showing the attitudes towards China have become much more supportive, and particularly among younger people. So I think the NDP's made some errors, and then you see it playing out with the canola battle that's going on, and there's farmers that are very disgruntled about Canadian policy and how that's impacted their ability to export to China. So there needs to be a basic reset. There needs to be an understanding that we don't see China as an enemy. We want to work with the biggest country in the world by population, or tied for biggest, and uh, and we don't want to increase xenophobic sentiment in this country. So that, I think, is the central piece. And I actually think there is some opening on this. Is an issue where there is some reevaluation that has taken place. Obviously, not enough. There needs to be some explicit shifting of gears and jettisoning this whole notion of like foreign interference, and which is in large part a sort of anti-China kind of dynamic. But I think there is some opening because partly because Donald Trump, and partly because there's just I think a sort of a recognition this has been a big mistake from a bit narrow Canadian business standpoint.
There most certainly is quite a dissent in the Chinese Canadian community. I mean, look at the creation of Canadians United Against Modern Exclusion, which I'm sure you are familiar with. And I mean, if you look at it, the Canadian government has very actively chosen a side of the community. I've written about this where they sponsored an openly anti-China forum, talking about a quote unquote accountability towards China, I believe in 2023. And the immigration department has given, hundreds of thousands, as of what I know right now, nearly 1 million to Uyghur separatist organization. They defended Tibet separatists and the Uyghur separatists publicly when they got sanctioned for separatist activities. And, actually, if you look at the testimony of the PIFI, the Foreign Interference Inquiry, actually, one of the staffers of URAP, Uyghur Rights Advocacy Project, openly talked about wanting government funding and to support the community, support the Uyghur community, basically, quote unquote, paraphrasing. So what that means is that there's forces in the Chinese Canadian community, in these diaspora forces, that want to create another Ukrainian Canadian Congress. There's moves from the government, and let's be real here, they're allies, they're separatist allies to actually formalize these structures in domination of the Chinese Canadian community. And I think the Chinese Canadian community understands that. Parts of them do. So I would have to agree with you. There is a significant opening on the issue. And speaking of anti-China sentiment, Eve, Interparliamentary Alliance on China, IPAC, funded by the US, critical organizing body for actions to undermine Chinese sovereignty, which really do trigger, as you've raised the problem, anti-Chinese racism and discrimination in Canadian politics and media. So would you want to see, if you become NDP leaders, NDP members ban MPs in the party from joining or being members of IPAC?
Yeah, I would definitely. I would always be very careful about um, um, because I would want a caucus that is fairly open to dissent. I would be careful to do any sort of like blanket ban, but definitely direct that this is not the outlook of Yves Engler-led NDP, because as you point out, this is just about stoking conflict and is very much contrary, in my opinion, also to the NDP narrow self-interest. Um, and on that note, like Heather McPherson, who's been the NDP foreign affairs critic, who is going to uh, who she's actually gone to Taiwan to meet with the president and stuff like that. I'm not sure if she's part of that parliamentary um, body, but she may well be. And yeah, there's definitely a need for a kind of root and branch questioning of the Canadian government. Like Jenny Kwan and Heather McPherson, they participate with Irwin Cotler as recently as June 11th in a Irwin Cotler being the lead apartheid activist over the past 50 years in Canada, and they join with Kotler for the conference, a press conference on Jimmy Lai, right? The Hong Kong billionaire who as a general rule, I'm not always keen on jailing people and this and that, and when you get into media questions, but this is somebody who is very openly supporting U.S. policy of using Hong Kong to destabilize China. So they're willing. Heather McPherson's willing to work with this leading advocate of genocide in Gaza, ostensibly, she claims, because, well, we agree on the issue, the important issue of Jimmy Lai. As I wrote about, the NDP's never come out, while they spend all this time on this billionaire, they've never come out in favor of the release of Marwan Barghouti, the Palestinian Mandela, who's been in jail for 25 years or so, and so you see that, and yeah, the participation in IPAC of Heather McPherson is sort of an example of that how that policy plays out, and all that needs to be seriously questioned and challenged.
So Heather McPherson is indeed a member of IPAC, just to clarify there. Now, Eve, I do have, really one more question for you now. So when you're running for this race with the other candidates that have been announced as of now, where do you really feel that you stand out? Why do people, should they be going ahead and volunteering or giving support to your campaign?
Well, it stands out in that it's a bottom-up campaign, and you see that with the policy committee and the drafting of the platform. And with regards to the local committees organizing, and they're organizing with a high level of autonomy and of action and operation. Also, the military question, I think, is a very important. The NDP has been very supportive of militarism, and Carney has gone in this radical militarist turn that is not just a threat to the world, but it's a threat to the different social programs. And I would say have a far greater knowledge and history of challenging Canadian militarism. You are seeing some echoes of that now that Avi Lewis has started criticizing Carney's militarist turn, and that's good. And we want more of that from the NDP. We're starting to see some of that coming out, but it's very kind of late to the game. Canada out of NATO, that's not being raised anywhere else. That is, in and of itself, if we were able in this campaign, even if we don't win, if we're able to actually get into mainstream kind of discussion that there is a political force calling for Canada out of NATO, that would be a huge contribution to the public debate. That is an issue that has become completely marginalized by the dominant political culture, even though it is, as I said, it was the position of the NDP members that voted for it in 1969. It was the official party position for many years. So that's a question that absolutely needs to be put on the agenda and raised. I've written about how in 3 months of campaigning, we've talked about questioned capitalism more than the whole NDP structure across the country over the past, I don't know, 3 years, 5 years. So just in 3 months, a fairly small activist insurgent campaign has been able to talk about capitalism and question it and oppose it more. So just that, these are discussions that need to get pushed, not just into the mainstream. Obviously, we'd want this on the front page of the Globe and Mail, but even within the NDP, even within NDP activist circles, where there is significant support for challenging capitalism, but it's just been totally driven off of the agenda. And so we've worked to try to push it onto the agenda. And so I would very much invite viewers, listeners to check out the website, check out the policy platform, and sign up to volunteer, donate if you can, and join the campaign because we are challenging this unjust ecocidal system. We are challenging the imperialism of Canadian foreign policy that has captured almost all of the media and almost all elements of the political parties. So again, check out. You can go to ndp2026.ca for the policy platform, which takes to my website, campaign website, Eve for NDP leader.ca.
Thank you, Eve. Now, also, you can find Eve on Twitter at Engler-Eve. So thank you very much, Eve, for speaking with the Canada Files.
Thanks for having me.
Canada Files audience, if you appreciate the journalism that the Canada Files does, please do consider setting up a monthly or annual donation. Thank you to the audience for getting this far, and once more, thank you to Eve. Goodbye, everyone. We'll see you next time.